It is the Seattle Seahawks. They are back in the playoffs. No Russell Wilson, no problem. And here to talk about the Seahawks is longtime Seahawks fan Dave Hudson. Dave, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to do this.
Well, thank you. There's 14 teams that have a chance to win the Lombardi, and we're one of them. So I'm fired up. Let's go.
Going into the line of questioning, you're so used to this already. How long have you been a fan of the Seahawks, and what made you become a Seahawks fan?
Long as I can remember, Earl. I was a little kid. I'm 44 years old, so the Seahawks franchise is 2 years older than me. But when I was a kid, I was going. And everybody that knows me has heard the story. But when I was a kid, going through the Sears and Roebuck catalog around Christmas time, about 5 or 6 years old, and I came across that silver helmet. Man, that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I've been in love ever since. Even though we have a blue helmet, but the retro look is actually coming back next year. That was approved this year by the NFL. So that old silver helmet, royal blue with the gray pants, that's actually going to be one of the Seahawks alternatives next year. I may be more excited about that than I am the playoffs, actually.
What is your most memorable moment as a Seahawks fan? To you, there's probably a lot of moments that stick out, good or bad, but to you, what is the one that is the most memorable?
Sure. So unfortunately, they happened within a 12-month span, right? Like the best and the worst. The best was obviously Super Bowl 48. I got to be there. That Super Bowl, it was in New York. So I got to attend that game and watch the Seahawks beat the statistically the greatest offense of all time, the 2013 Broncos. Still to this day, gained more yards than anybody in NFL history. And, the LOB took care of business 43-8. That was obviously the best moment. The worst moment was obviously 12 months later. Everybody knows about that, and we can just move on from that. But you got to give the ball to Marshawn. That's it.
Yeah, and we go into that before we break in to the expectations. Yeah, that has always been discussed, and there's always these rumors that Darrell Bevell and maybe Pete Carroll, it's like, let's make Russ the hero. Let's let him pass and not give the ball to Reliable, because I always joke that if it's goal line, all you have to do is like the Michael Jackson Smooth Criminal lean into the end zone, and you're going to get the touchdown instead of passing.
Right. Well, at the time, there was 25 seconds left. It was second down. Seahawks had one timeout. So I get the idea of throwing the ball, but throwing the ball over the middle where all the defense is, that seems silly. If they run the ball on second down, don't get it, they have to call a timeout. Then you have to pass the ball on third down. So I don't kill the passing call as much as I kill what pass was called. Throw something outbreaking. So then third down, if it's incomplete, you still have a timeout. You can still run it, call a timeout, and do something on fourth down. Because on fourth down, you can run or pass because it all comes down to that one play no matter what, right? But I really don't want to talk about that anymore. Oh, come on, you're hurting me. You're hurting me right now.
Going into the season, expectations, especially trading Russell Wilson to Denver, getting a heap of draft picks. What were your thoughts about the plan to go between Drew Lock and Geno Smith?
So I will tell you, I genuinely thought we'd be the worst team in the league this year. And I mean that sincerely. I felt like we were going to win 2-3 games maybe. I did always believe we were going to beat Denver. I did not think Russell Wilson could go into that stadium on opening day and beat Seattle, and I was right about that. But it ended up not looking anything like, in the end, what I thought. At the end of the year last year, it was obvious that the Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson thing was going to go awry. And I'll be very honest with you. I was pro fire Pete, keep Russ. And that was what I wanted them to do. And then when the owner came out and said that, she supported Pete, I was like, uh-oh, it's coming. And, I did like the trade. I did like what we got. But to be honest with you, I thought, again, we'd win 2 or 3 games. We get an early pick, both with Stroud and with Bryce Young, both probably coming out at that time. Now we know they are. I watched a lot of those guys this year, early, especially because I still expected that to happen again. After we won the first game, we lost the next 2. So I was still thinking, this is going to be a 3-win season up until about October. So yeah, I mean, this season has been, as far as versus expectations, I feel like Seattle is playing with more house money than anybody in the league, and Jacksonville too. But again, Jacksonville used number 1 pick on a quarterback. I mean, they expect to do this eventually. In Seattle, this is a complete shock. And it's all about this guy right here. It's all about Geno Smith. I mean, he's been the story of the year, certainly for the Seahawks, if not in the entire NFL.
Was there a point you were confident they were going to make the playoffs? I know they hit their stride in the middle of the season, had a bit of a struggle going into the final game of the season. But was there a particular point where you're thinking, okay, yep, the 12s are going back?
Yeah, when they beat the Chargers and the Giants back-to-back weeks in, I believe that was week 7 and week 8, got us to 5-3. Then we won again and got to 6-3. I thought it was possible, but again, I mean, when you watch these games, teams can win. There's a difference between a team winning and a team, looking convincing winning. Seattle really hasn't looked convincing against anyone all season except for the Chargers game. Now, the Chargers game, they actually looked good, but the Chargers, as we know, as they do every year, seems like, had a ton of injuries going into that game. So, yeah, I was pretty confident then, but I still thought anything could go wrong. I did not expect losing to the Raiders, losing to Carolina, late. So when we hit that stretch, frankly, with 2 weeks to go, I didn't think that we would get the playoffs. I didn't think we'd beat the Jets. I thought the Jets would come in, but then the Jets started looking bad. So we beat the Jets. The Rams always give us a hard time. We were very fortunate with the schedule that both of the Rams games were late. So Stafford was already out, didn't face Stafford either time, didn't face Aaron Donald either time, didn't face Cooper Kupp either time. So we really got fortunate with that part of the schedule. And beating the Rams at the end in overtime, and then, of course, beating the Jets in Week 17. And then those Lions came through. You got to love the Lions. I think the Lions are a better football team than we are, but we beat them early in the year, and that's why we're going, and they're not.
What was the point you were worried that they weren't going to make the playoffs?
Yeah, probably that Raiders game, because you know how this is, Earl. You're a fan just like everybody else is. You look at the schedule, right? You start saying, okay, we're going to win this one. We might not win this one. You start looking ahead, and when you start losing games that you kind of mark up as wins, the Raiders was one of those. Again, Carolina was one of those. Early in the season, we lost to Atlanta and New Orleans, which again, early I wasn't surprised, but then when you look back on it, you're like, ugh. We kind of gave those away. That was really the point when we got down to 7 and 8 with 2 weeks to go. And again, especially with Green Bay controlling their own destiny, knowing that we would need the Lions to win what for them would have been as far as the playoffs go, a game that it didn't matter. I didn't think the NFL did us any favors with putting that game on Sunday night, but it all worked out. And like I said, 2 exciting games. Our game could have gone either way, went to overtime, obviously. And then, of course, what everybody watched, the Lions-Packers game, which was a tremendous game that the Lions pulled out.
Funny you said that. Winning games, losing games, you should have won. And as a Washington fan, I sit there and look at that Browns game. And that,
yep.
A whole bunch of teams
yep.
be in the playoffs and a whole bunch of teams sitting at home. But, thanks to Ron Rivera's dumb move, Seattle gets –
And Washington was the team, frankly, 3 or 4 weeks to the end. That was the team I didn't think we'd be able to beat. I was actually hoping you guys would beat the Giants so that we could catch and tie the Giants the way we tied the Lions, because we beat the Giants also. So I figured, if we end up tied with the Giants, that's actually what I thought. I don't think the Giants are that good. They're like us. We're not very good either. But I don't think the Giants are that good, and I thought that, we may be a better team than them. So my hope was they'd come back down to earth, but they did what they had to do as well.
Yep. Hopefully, Seahawks fans send Carson Wentz money like Bills fans did for Andy Dalton. Going into the matchup with the brackets already set, and we already know the matchup is with the Seahawks. Who do you think you match up the best with in the NFC playoff bracket?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. We've already played Tampa Bay in Germany, played them tough, lost to 21-16. I got to be honest with you. Dallas looks bad. Dallas looks bad. I don't know who's going to win that game, but that would be the one I'd want to play. Now, of course, being the 7th seed, we've got to, if we beat San Francisco, which is highly unlikely, we then have to go play the 1 seed. So for us, I don't know that it matters a whole lot, but I would say, I think we've got as good a chance as anybody other than San Fran and Philly. And of course, we'd have to play them. If we somehow found a way to beat San Fran, we'd have to play Philly. So I don't like our chances to get to the Super Bowl a whole lot. But yeah, I mean, I think we match up well with Tampa. That's probably the best team, and since we played them already. And I will say, we are playing the 49ers. A lot of people have the 49ers going to the Super Bowl. I mean, they are outstanding, but we're not afraid of them. I mean, we've played them twice. I have a feeling they would have rather seen Green Bay than us. Not because we're better than Green Bay, but because we're not afraid of them. Like, they're not going to intimidate us. They're more talented than we are, but we're not going to be afraid of them. I mean, we're going to go in there and play and see what happens.
And of course, the Niners always have Aaron Rodgers' number. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is, they always have.
Yes,
you're
right.
Who's the team as a Seahawks fan scares you? Is it the Niners? You mentioned you don't, the lack of intimidation factor. Is it Philly? Is it Philly because you look at Minnesota. No one's afraid of Minnesota right now either.
Right. Well, I mean, by far the team I hate the most in the league is the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, I despise them. Russell Wilson is actually 17-4 against the Niners in his career, and he's 1-0 with the Broncos. He can't beat anybody with the Broncos, but he can beat them. But anyway, they're they don't miss him in Seattle, I can tell you that. But I hate losing to them. I mean, I absolutely hate it. I grew up in the 80s. A lot of my friends from high school were 49ers fans. I get a lot of, I hear from a lot of people on Facebook when the 49ers beat the Seahawks. So I really love beating them, hate losing to them. So I'm not real excited about them being so good and playing them right now. I actually told my brother before week 18, I said, I'd almost rather lose than go to the 49ers and lose to them a third time this season. But I lied. I'm excited. I'm ready to go. But yeah, it's the Niners. I mean that I think they're the best team in the NFC.
The thing was, when you look at Geno Smith, and everybody thinks the guy who squandered a chance with the Jets became a backup for a very long time, and then finally gets his chance to shine. What were you thinking that Geno Smith could do? What is it that he does so well that has helped move the chains for this offense on Seattle?
Well, that's a great question, and I think with him. So if you go back to do the preseason, it was really funny because a lot of people were just convinced Drew Lock was going to start. I mean, that was all you read in all the magazines. That was all you saw on all the pundits who, frankly, don't watch Seahawk games. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to call anybody out. The national, no one on ESPN watches Seahawks. Trust me, I listen to them talk about them. They have no clue. Okay, Pete loves Geno. Pete has always loved Geno since he showed up in 2018, and I knew he'd give Geno every chance. Geno has more arm talent than people realize. The guy can make every throw. He has average to slightly above average accuracy. He makes good decisions with the football. Now, we've seen that regress a little bit here in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and he's not a running quarterback, but he is a good runner when he decides to go. Seattle's real weakness on offense is the interior offensive line, guards and centers. So teams that get a push up the middle and Geno can't really climb the pocket, that's a struggle. That's what I worry about this week with San Francisco. But Geno is an accurate thrower of the football. He utilizes the tight ends and the middle of the field in a way that Russell Wilson never could or would. Noah Fant has been a great addition for that. He's been our number 3 receiver. We've got Lockett, and obviously DK Metcalf has 1,000-yard receivers this year. But Noah Fant's third on that list of our receivers. He's been a great addition in that Wilson trade. Ken Walker, obviously in the backfield, rookie 1,000-yard rusher. Once Rashad Penny goes down in the annual Rashad Penny's out for the year game, it usually happens about week 5 or 6. It happens all the time. But Ken Walker's been great, 1,000-yard rusher. So offensively, it's a pretty good football team. You're going to see, again, I think you'll see them invest in guards and center in the offseason, whether it's the draft or free agency or both. But offensively is not the problem with this football team. I mean, they are a solid offensive team, top 10 passing offense. So that's not the problem. The other side of the ball is the issue. But yeah, so Gino does a great job, keeps the sticks moving, great on third down, high completion percentage, doesn't go for the bombs as often as Russ, not anywhere close, but again, much more accurate over the middle of the field.
Going into the Super Bowl prediction, who do you have coming out of the AFC? Who do you have coming out of the NFC? And who's going to win, and what is the final score?
Well, I do think the three teams in the top of the AFC, and my Eagle fan friends are going to be really upset when I say this, but I think the three best teams in the AFC are better than anybody in the NFC. Picking between Cincinnati, Kansas City, and Buffalo is really difficult. I'm going to take Cincinnati, even though I think Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback of the group. And something about Joe Burrow, man, that guy's got it. Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, they are loaded on offense, and other than Buffalo, they probably played the best defense. They certainly play better defense than Kansas City, and they have Kansas City's number. The real question is going to be Cincinnati's got to beat them both as third seed. So they'll have to beat Buffalo in the divisional round, and then turn around and beat Kansas City the next week. That is a tough ask. That is a real tough ask. But I am going with Cincinnati in the AFC.
And in the NFC?
It can't be the Niners because we're going to beat them. So in that case, I got to go with the Eagles, right? If we're playing for money, I'm probably going to take San Francisco. But entertainment purposes, we're going to beat them, and it's going to be the Eagles.
And final score of the Super Bowl.
I think Cincinnati gets it done. They're probably looking at maybe a 28-17 Cincinnati victory.
And I know I'm going to mention this a lot. Everybody's looking at what happened last week. Some people may say that Buffalo might be the team of destiny as of after what happened. And again, sometimes depending on if there's a matchup with Cincinnati and Buffalo in Buffalo, that could be a huge matchup, especially with the emotions running high and everything. And you best believe that if you see DeMar Hamlin somewhere out on that field in Buffalo, I think that's probably going to cruise them to the Super Bowl. If that
absolutely. But I will say this: they seem to not be able to beat Kansas City. I know they beat Kansas City this year in the regular season, but come playoff time, if it's Buffalo and Cincinnati, if it's Buffalo and Kansas City, I'm taking Kansas City. We can't. I think we've got to kind of gotten too used to Pat Mahomes' greatness. He's the best player in the league. They are. You always have to consider them a favorite. And I realize I just picked Cincinnati, but at the end of the day, I still think Kansas City is the favorite, and I would expect Kansas City to beat Buffalo. Now that's a neutral site game now, which is interesting, but we'll see how that plays out too.
Yeah, but if they end up playing Kansas City, it depends. If they end up playing Kansas City, it depends on that whoever if Jacksonville ends up losing their matchup, that could change. That could change the whole path of things as well, because it might end up being 1, 2, 3, 4 in the second round. So, keep your eye on whoever the Jacksonville game, because that could the Chargers could play it could throw a wrench into everything.
Yeah, and again, I think if I'm Kansas City, I'm probably rooting for Jacksonville. Again, for the same reasons we talked about with Seattle and San Francisco. Kansas City is the better team, but the Chargers aren't afraid of them. They're going to go in there and play them. They played them real tough first game of the season when they were actually healthy, and that'll be interesting. My 10-year-old son's a big Chargers fan, and my brother's a Chiefs fan, so that's always interesting too. That'll add a dynamic around here.
And as we start to wrap that up, and I thank you for any shout outs you want to give, and what are ways people can reach out to you to talk Seahawks football?
So I appreciate that. I'm on Twitter at XEA76. That's XEA76. And again, I use my Twitter primarily for sports. So anytime anybody wants to get on there and follow. Also remember, thanks to the wonderful Denver Broncos, the Seattle Seahawks are one of the very few teams in NFL history that have both made the playoffs and have a top 5 draft pick. So Broncos country, let's ride. Appreciate that.